Well, hello there, family, and welcome back to the OCD Family Podcast. It's been a weird week over in my neck of the woods. We got some snow, we got some hail. I mean, it's almost April, and I have to tell you, I need the leaves on the trees to bloom and for the cold to go away. Am I right? I mean, I am so over it. But I'll tell you what I'm not over. Hanging with you, fam. And today's special guest expert and lived experience warrior, Amanda Petrik-Gardner, LCPC. Because not only is she a hoot, but she's also sharing hope. I'm Nicole Morris, licensed marriage and family therapist and mental health correspondent. And let me be the first to say, welcome to the family. The OCD family, that is. I am here to create a community of support for family members, spouses, partners, parents, adult children, as there may be adult words, and chosen family of OCD sufferers and their community. I've had over 22 years of experience in the mental health field, but please note that this information does not qualify or substitute as a diagnostic evaluation, therapy, or treatment, and it is presented on an as-is basis. Please follow up with a qualified mental health provider in your area regarding concerns for yourself or loved ones. Thank you for joining us today. Now, let's get started. Okie dokie. All right, fam. So, like I said, this has been a weird week. My little family here bought a new to us van, which was really exciting because our prior van was on its last leg. And we've been saving for this purchase, so it's always really fun to see and experience the fruits of our labor. But then, not even an hour after driving away, it started to snow. We live in the Midwest region of the United States, and while snow isn't, how shall I say, unexpected for this time of year, it's definitely a big disappointment. And no living thing was more bewildered, I think, than my poor daffodils, which popped up about a week or two ago after soaking in this luxurious sunshine and warmth we were having, only to be thwarted. I mean, the poor things. They're like completely spent on the ground, and never have I related so much to a daffodil. But I do feel the warmth inside because today we get to talk about a very important yet beautiful part of the OCD treatment process when it comes to inference-based cognitive behavioral therapy, or I-CBT. And it's going to be super fun because I'm bringing a fun friend and treasured colleague to share more about all of this with you. But first, let me just say, if you're new to I-CBT or even new to OCD, first of all, I want to welcome you because whether it's you or your loved one, chances are things are pretty overwhelming at the moment. No matter how little or how much you know, you belong. And I really do try my best to remember that there's always new family joining in on different episodes along the way. So it's okay if you're not an expert in this. You're the expert in you, in your family dynamics, and we are better together. So while for the purposes of today's chat, we're not going to be focusing specifically on the definition of OCD, I will take this opportunity to note that I always have show notes, including all my citations and resources for each and every episode available over at ocdfamilypodcast.com. Just look for this episode's blog and there will be links to all the things and more. So if you're looking to learn more about OCD, particularly from the frameworks of both exposure and response prevention, or I-CBT, which are my go-to evidence-based treatments for OCD, then please check out those resources. All right, with that, number 2, I would love to share more information about today's guest, Amanda, with you. So Amanda Petrik-Gardner, LCPC, LPC, and LIMHP, that's a whole lot of letters, Amanda, specializes in the treatment of OCD and obsessive-compulsive related disorders. Amanda currently provides teletherapy to the states of Kansas, Colorado, Nebraska, Missouri, Michigan, Maine, Arizona, and Florida. So Amanda's been busy, fam. But not too busy for us, because guess what? She's going to hang out with us for not only 1, but 2 episodes, and I couldn't be more excited about it. So what we're going to cover in this first episode is a deeper understanding regarding what the feared possible self is and what we mean by real self. Now, to do this, we're zooming in on some of our I-CBT modules that our dedicated colleagues and practitioners facilitate in OCD treatment worldwide. But this is as good a time as any to remind us, fam, that this isn't treatment. However, I think there's an allure and confusion and misunderstanding milling around about I-CBT. And so I'm very grateful to Amanda for taking the time to help us conceptualize some pretty key concepts together. Now, I will note, when someone is starting the treatment protocol for I-CBT, we aren't starting with this idea of feared possible cell. So we'll definitely take some time to explain how I-CBT uses an upstream approach to treatment. And if all of that just sounds like gobbledygook to you, hang with us, fam. Hang, because we're going to give our best effort to catch you up to speed. And as you'll hear today, Amanda and I both struggle with hyper-responsibility and over-attentiveness, shall we say. So trust, fam, we've got you. And then next week, we're going to be putting our learning into practice with a role play and some I-CBT games to just seal the deal on these meaty concepts. So with that, let's get to it. Well, welcome back to the OCD Family Podcast, and today I'm pleased to have Amanda Petrik-Gardner with us. She's a licensed professional counselor and an expert in our OCD field, helping people grasp better understandings of treatment for OCD. But here in the US, as this wave of learning about inference-based CBT has come into our purview here, it's been around for about 30 years, but in the US, it's a lot newer concept. She's done a really great job. Does a lot of really helpful infographics and social media. If you've been to the IOCDF conference, you've likely seen her if it's been about I-CBT, because she's one of the only people that's ever presented on I-CBT at IOCDF. So welcome, Amanda. So glad that you could be here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like I'm in the presence of a celebrity.
Wow, that's high praise, Amanda. We'll see how she feels about that towards the end. She might be like, I don't know. But I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of fun. And Amanda is graciously going to be here with us this week, fam, and next week, because we have lots to talk about. And I'm really excited because one of the things we're going to zoom in on is talking about the feared possible self, talking a little more in depth about one of the main concepts that we learn about in inference-based CBT. So I'm excited about that. But first, before we dive in, I have just found this to be a really interesting subject since I've been talking to a whole range of people lately. I would love to hear what got you into treating OCD in the first place. And have you always treated it, or is this something that you came into upon awareness with a client?
Mhm. So I started as a therapist, just working with kiddos, kind of that general therapist, doing everything, seeing everyone. And I noticed myself really connecting with obsessive compulsive related disorders. And so when our agency created a special team just to work with these individuals, get specialized treatment, I was like, I need to be on this team. I applied. I want to be on this anxiety treatment program. At the time, they had OCD included in the anxiety treatment program, and I didn't get in. I was not selected to be part of the clinicians that were in this program. And then I went to the management and I was like, I need to be in this. I understand these clients. I am this client. I understand this treatment. And somehow they added an extra clinician to be on this treatment program. And so I was learning the treatments, treating these clients for many years until I went off on my own into private practice and then started to specialize in OCD and the obsessive compulsive related disorders because I am that person. I recognized, and I had never been officially diagnosed myself, but I had recognized for years that this is what I had. And so it just helped me understand what they were experiencing and helped me just be a little bit more compassionate and get the treatment and what they needed. And so that was kind of my route into getting into this specialty.
I love that. I mean, not only are you an advocate now for helping people learn about it, but you really were like, no, you made a mistake. I need to be on this team, which is hard to do. It's very intimidating, but you put it out there like, I get this and I am this and I want to be able to help with this. That's amazing. I was going to say, if they passed on you, I bet they're kicking themselves.
Thank you. Somehow I got in, mostly just because I complained, but it all worked out. And I don't know where I would be had I not gotten on that treatment program and gotten the training that I did.
You know what? I think it's such a relatable and a cool example because I think so many people listening right now have had to advocate to work through different insurance systems, different wait lists. A lot of people may start therapy not with an OCD specialist and have to figure out, like, no, I'm in the wrong treatment. This isn't
Mhm.
helping, but I don't want to give up on treatment. I actually believe that there's still hope, which is a very hard place to be. So I think that's really relatable going out there and being like, this is wrong. There's gotta be something more. Come on, come on. So I love that. And then in terms can I actually ask an addendum question here? So in terms of I-CBT, how did I-CBT come on the radar for you?
Great question. I was thinking about this. Like, how did I even learn about ICBT? I think, like many of us, we started just to hear about it in the OCD community, with other clinicians would mention it,
Mhm.
whether on social media or just in consultation groups. Like many people, we were like, oh, like, is this a thing? Should I dip my feet in? And I bought the manual. I wouldn't read it for a while because I was just this diehard exposure response prevention. It works. And then finally one day I picked up the manual. And again, as a clinician with lived experience, it just made
It
sense.
clicked, yeah.
It clicked, and I was one that was, like, not confident enough to use it with my clients at first. So I was like, I'm going to test it on myself. I'm going to learn it and then start working through the process and the steps on some of my own obsessions. And
Mhm.
again, not clicked, but I was seeing so much progress that I never saw because I was too afraid of exposures with certain obsessions, certain themes.
Yeah.
I was
It's
in. I was all in at that point.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And when you had first heard about it before you actually learned more about it, do you remember? At this point, I can remember because it's all on audio here, which is unique that my journey has been caught on tape here. But I remember, like, my first impression, even somebody trying to tell me about it, I was like, oh, that sounds like voodoo and rumination and okay. Yeah, like you're just kind of getting engaged in the mental compulsion. That was my first thought, but I was also open and always felt it was a little funny because I was in the field about 20 years before I started treating OCD and I did think it was funny that they didn't really have a range of evidence-based treatments to treat it. And so I was like, I'm open, but this sounds like hogwash, which is my Midwest coming out. It was hogwash. And then I
Mhm.
learned about it and I was like, wait a minute, it did, it clicked. And I couldn't tell you why at first. I'm like, that made sense. I couldn't explain it to somebody right now, but it did make sense. So that is interesting. So you use yourself as kind of an experiment, which I totally can empathize with. I've done that many times too myself while you were learning the concepts. And now she's helping train clinicians and awareness for the OCD family community and the broader OCD community. And so today we're going to be zooming in a little more on one of the modules and one of the meaty concepts, kind of a two-part concept because it's hard to do one without the other. But before we get in, just for any new fam joining us today, maybe this is the first they've heard of I-CBT. I-CBT is sometimes thought of as internet-based CBT as well, which is not. We happen to be on the internet right now, but that's not what it stands for. And I know it's hard to paint with a broad brush because it's such a dense concept. But just for anybody that might be walking into this gathering new, going, oh my gosh, do I belong here? I don't know all the words they're saying. Can we just do a brief overview? What is ICBT?
A lot of times, the way I actually explain ICPT is by explaining it in the way of discussing ERP, exposure and response prevention. Because a lot of times, clinicians or clients coming in have already heard of ERP. And so
Hmm.
they understand that ERP is tackling the anxiety they are experiencing, the compulsions, reducing the compulsions. And so they understand that treatment in that world. And so I'll explain that instead of hitting on and managing the anxiety or the compulsions that are a result of the obsessions, the
Hmm.
doubts that you're experiencing, we are going to actually tackle the doubts itself. Let's figure out where these doubts are coming from in the first place. How are they constructed? Why are we having these doubts and not all these other doubts we could possibly have? What are the tricks is using to even pull us into these doubts and believe them? And if we can understand the why and not even get absorbed into them, then that anxiety and those compulsions won't even happen. So it tackles the beginning of this whole sequence instead of the end of the sequence, which is the anxiety and the compulsions. So if clients come in or clinicians come in already knowing ERP, I often explain it in that manner.
Yeah.
But if they don't know ERP, then I just explain it's the why. Let's figure out the root of why we're even having OCD.
Yeah, yeah, and it is interesting because it is so different than exposure and response prevention. Again, that's ERP and I-CBT, what we're talking about,
Mhm.
inference-based cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's a mouthful. That's why we say I-CBT, right? But in terms of looking at it, it really is looking at different sides of the same monster, the OCD monster here, right? Or the same animal. Often an analogy that gets brought up a lot just in the therapy world, not just in OCD, is the elephant in the room. And it's like, well, this elephant has two sides. It has many sides depending on where you're positioned. But if you were head on or rear on, it's going to look completely different. And if you describe that, somebody may or may not be able to see how the two relate, but it is the same animal. And so, really, ERP is very different. And it takes a little bit of a different type of psychoeducation if you're coming in from an exposure and inhibitory learning model. Which, if you want to learn more about ERP or I-CBT, fam, I would point you to icbt.online. I would point you to iocdf.org or earlier episodes. And also Amanda, which like, fam, I got you. And I always put resources on the blog for each episode we do together. So Amanda also has a lot of great content in all spheres, really, in terms of how we treat this. And so, for the purposes of today, we're going to really focus on, like you said, the why. Part of the why, we have a 12-step module program if you look at the treatment model in totality for I-CBT. And one of the concepts that I think is kind of tricky, and sometimes people confuse it with just like my own self-esteem or self-doubt that I might have. Where does this cross into pathological? Is this concept of both the vulnerable self theme and the feared possible self, which I've used synonymously in the past, but we're starting to see a little bit of differentiation in those concepts coming out. So we're going to talk about that. And if you're like, what are you talking about? Tuned into the right episode, because we're going to tell you. And even people that do know what we're talking about sometimes are like, yeah, I can get lost. And the psychoeducation piece of I-CBT is dense, but it's really a big process of slowing down. So I find when we hit module 4 and, well, even 3 sometimes within I-CBT, clients are like, I want to get to the not having these feelings anymore. And we're slowing it down so much to understand how that why gets formulated. And so today we're going to zoom in on feared possible self, and we'll talk about vulnerable self themes as well as real self. And so we're going to zoom into that today. And then next week, fam, if you join us again, which I think you're going to have so much fun and interesting learning here, that you want to come back for next week because we're going to do a role play. We're also going to have some fun. You know how I like to do it. We're going to play this game style. We're going to do all the things, Amanda and I. So first, we're going to start with this idea of feared possible self and vulnerable self theme. So Amanda, can you tell us, why does it matter? What's important about the FPS? Again, we like to acronym things, guys. It gets very wordy. FPS, feared possible self and vulnerable self theme, VST. Can you tell us, why is it important for us to even slow down and go to this step?
So as I mentioned, we want to get at the root. So why are we having these doubts, and not every single doubt? And one of the ways that we figure out to answer that question is we got to figure out the vulnerable self theme and the feared possible self. So just like you, I've used these terms synonymously for a long time until we've had more research and recognized these are two distinct things. You want me to go ahead and explain kind of what they are?
I would love an explanation. I am here for it, Amanda.
Awesome. So the vulnerable self we have found is not necessarily unique to OCD. Every listener out there has a vulnerable self theme. This is just something that you are extra vulnerable or sensitive to. And I'll give some examples. I think about parents, caregivers, even maybe all your dog moms and dads out there. You might have this vulnerable self theme of just like not wanting any harm to ever come to your baby, right? Your kiddo. Like you just want to be the best parent, best, most responsible. dog mom, dad, right? That might just be something you're extra sensitive to. You don't want any harm to ever come to your kiddo.
Mm-hmm.
Just something you're very sensitive to. Vulnerable possible self is a doubt. Just like our obsessions are doubts, right? They are what ifs, they are maybes, they're questions that aren't actually happening in the here and now. Well, our feared possible self is also a doubt, but it's a doubt that we could possibly be something that we're not.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see that the vulnerable self theme and the feared possible self could tie together
Mm-hmm.
just like that. And I'll give some examples for myself. Just like as a mom, I don't want anything bad to ever happen to my kiddos. I want to be responsible. I want to take care of them. That's something I'm vulnerable to.
Right.
My feared possible self is this doubt that what if I could be somebody that is just so negligent, somebody that's just so irresponsible? That is just another type of doubt.
Yeah.
But it is a doubt that's hitting on those vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're going to get to when we talk about the real self, our feared possible self goes completely against. It is the opposite of who we really are. Now, I know your listeners don't know me personally, but anybody that knows me personally knows I am like the most attentive, responsible, conscientious person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Probably null, as a lot of people would call me. But of course, OCD is going to say what? Amanda, you could just be so careless.
Yeah.
So negligent. You're going to poison your kids. You're going to let them fall off a cruise ship. You're going to get them dirty and contaminated.
Yeah.
And if we can figure out that feared possible self, you're going to find out that that's actually what's underneath a lot of those obsessions that seem so unrelated, like all these random whack-a-mole obsessions that are popping up. It's
Yeah.
actually like this one or maybe two feared possible selves that are tying them all together.
Our FPSs could be besties because I'm also a fellow, what if I could neglect? I'm probably like one of the more risk averse, cautious, overly prepared, hyper responsible people. And you can find hyper responsibility and those sorts of traits in other feared possible selves. And one of the things we're going to talk about is just kind of the range of how feared possible selves can present. Because I think neglect is one of the ones that are more talked about. But I think people sometimes struggle with like, well, I don't know what else that I can come up with. And one of the things that I tell my clients is it's kind of like we're making a nice reduction sauce out of all our obsessions, right? And when we reduce it down, what is that common denominator that is really rich and meaty there at the end? That is that feared possible self, or as I was saying as well before, VST. And you can hear it on the history of the podcast. I use them synonymously. And so, in terms of differentiating, why are we now juxtaposing them? What is the difference between normative and obsessional presentations of vulnerable self themes versus feared possible self?
I think that distinction, when they found out that, again, everybody has a vulnerable self that is not unique to OCD. And so that was a big part.
Yeah.
They recognize not everybody has a feared possible self. Not every Joe walking around is sitting there thinking, but what if I could be this person? But what if I am immoral? But what if I am unethical? What if I am harmful? What if I am evil? What if I am irresponsible? Not everybody has that. That is an obsessional doubt that we see with OCD. So while yes, people have these sensitivities, they might walk around like hoping, yeah, but I don't want to get a bad reputation or I don't want to do anything that makes me look like a bad person. They're not walking around with this obsessional doubt that pulls them in, that causes anxiety, that then they are acting on compulsively.
Yeah. So the FSP, then, the feared possible self, or did I say that right?
P.S.
FPS. There used to be a full service partnership. This is where my brain is going with FSP. Used to be a supervisor for the FSP program in LA. Okay. FPS. It's like GPS, but it's an FPS. It's a feared possible self. It's the byproduct then that we get out of inferential confusion, which we talked about conceptually in the overview. But as we think about the why that we've found to be measurable and that has been researched in a lot of these different studies around I-CBT is around something called inferential confusion. Can you help family members understand what's the relationship between inferential confusion and feared possible self?
Yeah. So first to define inferential confusion, and I give a really easy definition because these are not terms I use in my everyday life. So I just explained inferential confusion is mistaking imagination and reality, something that's not happening for reality or some reality for something that's not happening. The example I often give, because I like to give a metaphor of OCD is like a magician was performing tricks. It's like if you saw that trick from a magician where they cut the lady in half. Have you all seen that trick? They cut
Uh-huh.
her in half and separate her body into two. That would be inferential confusion would be like you thinking she really is cut in half and is about to bleed out and die on stage.
Uh-huh.
That's inferential confusion. You thinking that trick is reality.
And I tell you, with no epidural, she handles it well. I mean,
She right? But even though we know, oh, how are they doing that on stage?
right.
We know it's just a trick.
She's so happy about being sawed in half. I was like, that was your give. That was your give.
I'm smiling that whole time.
I have a bigger reaction to a paper cut than she did to being sawed in half. But you're right. Like in terms of realizing the mechanism is the trick, the con, the illusion, right? And so when you say the illusion, this is the meat of the why that we're measuring. When we think about feared possible selves, like you said, not everybody has that. But if you have OCD, then there's a direct relationship to feared possible self and inferential confusion. So it's you're watching it and that woman is sawed in half. Amazing pain tolerance. Maybe she has leprosy because she does not register it. But I mean, I have leprosy on my bingo card, but why not? Why not? And so in terms of inferential confusion, then it's really just around these specific slices. Now, people that have lived experience may be tuning in, or family members going, I've tried to talk them off this train and they are committed. There is such a strong absorbing nature to the feared possible self, right? Because you could say it's not who you really are. And it's like, maybe I fooled you too. Maybe, oh my gosh, maybe I'm fooling myself, right? Because it's hard for people to buy in the reality. I mean, it's like the reality. That is the buy-in problem when it comes to I-CBT. But it's hard for people to buy into, like, I'm not actually this person versus us starting to understand and reconnect with who our real self is. And so, can you help just anyone listening that's been thinking or maybe hearing about I-CBT, or maybe just this again could be a first meeting for them, but what's that process like when we're looking at that in treatment then? Because if it was as simple as going, oh, that's not you, this is you. Family members here are like, hi, I've tried that. Something else, please. Because it's hard to understand why it's different and why a therapist, or maybe you can say it and it's different, and the family member said it for the last 5 years or however much, right? So, can you talk about the process of what it looks like and really diving in to understanding why that's not actually you?
Absolutely. And you're right. Nobody's just going to say, that's not who you are, and that's going to work. Just like nobody's going to say, your obsession isn't real. That's not going to work. It's so much more complex than that. So, to begin, and tell me if we're getting too much into the weeds here, I like to explain to clients the three big components of inferential confusion. Like, here's why inferential confusion happens. And I ask clients, tell me as I'm describing this, if any of these three components happen to you.
Bring on the
Okay.
components. We love
Okay.
components.
First, overly relying on possibility. OCD just loves to say it's just possible. Even though you know you're not harmful, evil, a monster, a murderer, it's just possible. Does OCD ever just say it's possible? And it doesn't always sound like it's possible. It can sound like a lot of different words. It can just say, but it might, but maybe not today, but maybe later,
It
but
could.
one day.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so does it ever use possibility? Because sometimes just overly relying on remote possibilities, there you go, inferential confusion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the second component, it loves to make you distrust your senses or yourself. Even though, again, you know you're not this person, or you know this doubt is not occurring, but maybe you can't trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can't trust your intentions, your desire, what you see, what you hear. Boom, it's got you.
Yeah.
So, has OCD ever told you that? You can't trust yourself.
I mean, has OCD ever told you, fam? What do you think? Track along.
Absolutely.
Track along. Yeah.
So if that's happened, that's part of inferential confusion. It has pulled you in. The third one, it sounds fancy. It's called irrelevant associations. All that means is OCD loves to pick and choose facts, stories, experiences, to make your doubt sound credible. So it'll say, well, somebody has murdered somebody before. Pedophiles do exist. These things just do happen.
Hmm.
And it uses those facts. It's true. We can't debate that, nor would we, just to make your doubt sound more real and scary. And then, boom, put those components together. You're hearing possibilities in one ear, distrust of yourself in another, some irrelevant associations sprinkled in. We're inferentially confused. We're believing the story, even though we know. And every client will say, I know this is not happening, or I know I'm not this person.
Yeah. In our culture today, especially with the presence of social media and the reach, literally, you can reach someone across the world before you even think about something yourself, and it can go around the globe. It is interesting because even when we think of more legacy media and how information was presented and shared over the decades, over the centuries, we can see how there's a spin on it, right? So even through oral tradition, we're going way back, y'all. We're going way, but families, we get it because stories pass down generations. We tell stories about grandma, great grandma, the different things, right? Oral tradition still has its place, but we all have our spin on it. And so, depending on how we present the information, another word that might work in there is cherry picking, which is also out of context, which gets used a lot in I-CBT. So, not trying to equate the two, but it really is like taking this really edited, isolated slice and using that as justification and proof that, yeah, you probably are this really big bad person, right? That OCD says you might be. And if this sounds familiar to your loved one, family, or to you if you have lived experience, join the crowd. Because as creative and idiosyncratic as OCD is, meaning it can present in endless amounts of ways, it is very formulaic in the way that it functions. Again, that brings us back to that idea of inferential confusion. And so, why are your obsessions different than my obsessions, are different than your sister's obsessions, different than somebody else? It comes to this idea of feared possible self. And I think a lot of people, I don't know about you, Amanda, but when I sit with clients on this, even after we've gone through and really slowed down and looked at the modules leading up to talking about VSTs and PS, I think that I've heard a lot from clients, and I wonder, I bet you have as well, in terms of getting into this. It's a little hard for them to swallow at first. They're like, well, but I think this is actually who I am. And so the process can be hard, but also when it clicks, for me even, and I've seen for some of my clients I can even think of right now, and if you're listening, you know who you are, that this was a game changer moment where we saw the thread that connected all of this. And then we were able to say, if that's a con, if that's an illusion, we're not going to debate with OCD. But if that's not true, would this be different? And for a lot of people can be a game changer moment. And I talked about this with Margaret McCall as well in terms of the presentation of BDD. Because that story, if this wasn't true, that this thing about you isn't this grotesque, ugly piece of you, would that be the same? And for a lot of people, I think this is a huge concept. But it leaves you in a very vulnerable place because this is who OCD has gaslighted you are for so long and giving you the promise of what we call an I-CBT, the bubble that will keep you safe. And really, the bubble is what really keeps you stuck and isolated from what's happening right here, right now. And so we juxtapose this with the concept of the real self. Can you tell us more about the real self?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to preface this with this is a huge part of why I love I-CBT so much because we are finally helping clients learn and trust who their real self is because no other treatment has ever been like, let's figure out who you really are
Uh-huh.
and trust in that.
Mm-hmm.
Because for so many years, clients have been taught to just sit with the uncertainty you could be a murderer, sit with the uncertainty you could kill your baby. And it's like, no, Nicole, you're actually like the most responsible woman in the world. How about we learn to trust in that? So the real self is who you genuinely, authentically are. That's the you that shows up in reality based on your actions, based on observations of others, based on what your senses, your perception shows us. And we're going to identify that. And we're going to, again, use our senses to learn how to trust that just like we use our senses and trust in things all day, every day.
Yeah.
And I think there's something so beautiful in that
Yeah.
because every non OCD person in the world gets to just know who they are and walk around and trust that. Why can't we, as somebody with OCD, get to know that and trust that too? Why do I have to just think that I'm a murderer and be okay with that?
And for anyone listening that's never done treatment or isn't familiar with ERP, that might be a strange statement to hear because you might be like, why would I want to think that I'm a murderer? I never face that. But what I will say is from that learning model, from that direction of the elephant, from that side of the OCD monster, there is also a formula in terms of OCD can still be as creative as all get out, but there's still that formula of facing those thoughts and realizing thoughts don't equal reality, thoughts don't equal action, thoughts don't equal you are this thing. And so if you have an intrusive thought, it doesn't mean that you're a monster because you thought of that. And again, I can't take out the I-CBT language. That's not how they would necessarily describe it. But it is really interesting, and you might go, well, that sounds cruel. And it's not that it's cruel, it's evidence-based as well. And we learn that the brain actually learns new learning when we face the thing, face the reality that that's not what's happening, and our brain is able to learn a different response. Those compulsions get our brain stuck in that place. But for a lot of people that have heard, maybe they discovered they have OCD or they're just coming to grips with that, the idea of facing the thing that they've been trying to protect themselves and their loved ones from for so long is terrifying. And it's not an easy treatment. No one will tell you it's an easy treatment. It's a life-giving treatment, but it's not an easy treatment. It's an evidence-based treatment, but it's hard, right? And it's not to say that I-CBT isn't hard, but it has a non-exposure approach. Like, I don't have to see the magic trick. I don't have to watch 10 women be sawed in half to be like, maybe she is and just amazing. Because I couldn't even, the idea I found out I was pregnant and I needed an epidural, I was like, I'm done. But you don't have to watch the 10 magic tricks because if you already get that it's an illusion, in fact, any magic trick now, like no matter what the content, and this is the really cool thing about I-CBT, because a lot of it, before you figure out that common thread, that feared possible self, it's like Kevin Bacon in the land of OCD. We're all 6 degrees somewhere, right? Some of those are a little closer than you thought. You're like, this obsession has nothing to do with that. And I'm like, perhaps we explore this a little more, right? It's the Kevin Bacon of inferential confusion. I shall now just think of the two synonymously instead of
I
BSG
love
and
that.
feared possibles. But yeah, it's really kind of cool because any magic trick I watch, it doesn't have to be the sign the lady, like anyone. I'm just kind of like, even if it's really convincing, I'm like, but it's magic. Because that's what this is. It's a magic trick. And so that can be really, really healing. I find the real possible self, if we have like a really aha click moment in that feared possible self module, it's a little easier to come up with that real self. But coming up with the real self can be tricky. And so can we talk a little more about what does that process look like?
So there's several strategies or ways that we can go about that. One of my favorite ways is just to look at how do we show up day to day in reality. Let me ask you, can you just name some things that you have done today? Doesn't have to be anything big or glorious. You didn't save the world. Maybe you didn't go and volunteer, or maybe you did, but just name some tasks that you've done today, whether it's like I fed my kids or
Sure. So I didn't over snooze. I didn't. This might be a little bit of a roundabout, but I don't love snoozing because it's hard to rein in the snoozing. So the alarm goes off, we should get up. But my husband is a little cranky if he doesn't have a little bit of slither time. He wants to slither out of bed, transform into actual human after he's woken up. So this has been a compromise in marriage, especially as our kids are school age and have to be there at a certain time. They're not cool with us just going, hey, I just got up. That was great for me. And they got up way earlier, but that's okay. They, survival of the fittest. And then we got them to school. So I didn't serial snooze this morning. That was good for me. I had some espresso, which I'm having a second cup of espresso that is very room temperature now. Not my favorite, but it's kind of like a
Mhm.
McDonald's fry. It's like no matter how cold it is, at some point you're like, "Eh, that's a McDonald's fry. I'm gonna eat it." I say in loving memory because I can't have gluten and it's cross-contaminated. That's a whole nother thing. So those are the things I did today. I actually got my kids to school because I didn't cereal snooze, and I had espresso, and now I'm having a cold one, but I'm not mad at it. What would you say about my real self with that, Amanda?
So, and I'm going to add on some other things that I observed of you as well.
Ooh.
So, things like you woke up on time, you got the kids to school, you fixed the audio for your podcast as we were logging on. These are how you show up in reality. These are just your actions, right? You saw them, I saw them. We can make inferences, which are just conclusions based on reasoning process. We can make inferences about our actions. So, I'm not even going to tell you what your real self is. I'm going to ask you, what can we infer about a person that wakes up on time? What kind of person wakes up on time?
Amazing people.
Yes, they do. No.
They wake up on time.
All
Responsible people that are not
right.
getting letters from the school going truancy. Why? Yeah, so no legal case.
There you go. What kind of people get their kids to school?
Nannies first because they have energy, and then parents second, and I am the second. But
All
also, I
right.
function as a nanny to my own children, but not with the energy.
What kind of people they get their audio to work on their podcast? They are determined to figure it out. And
I mean, my husband does, but today it was me, people. It was me. I'm feeling so good about me right now.
so, looking at all these, though, I mean, somebody you woke up on time, got the kids to school, you got your audio fixed. What do some of these show about who you really are? You already said, like, somebody that's responsible.
A parent, yeah, conscientious,
Mhm.
rule
Yeah.
following, did not have legal action from the school saying where are your truant children. So that's good for me. Love that. Love no illegal
Nice.
or trouble with the law. That's great.
So we already know way more about who you really are just based on like those three little actions, right? I didn't add an espresso part. I'm guessing, what does that say about you? You need your espresso.
Because I know what a good cup of coffee means. If you're going to caffeinate yourself, make it count. Make
I
it count.
love that.
Yes.
We learn more about you in those few little actions. You're responsible, conscientious, rule following. I even said determined. You're going to
Ooh.
figure this out. You learn more about that than some feared possible self that was built on possibilities.
She
That was
also
built.
called me a celebrity in the beginning, so I'm kind of like living on that too.
There's so many different activities that we use in I-CBT to figure out your real self. Observations of others. I could pull in a room of your loved ones and ask them, how does Nicole show up in reality? Describe her for me. So can you take a guess? What would your husband, what would your best friend, your family say?
It would depend the mood you caught my husband in. He might be like she remembers everything, remembering all of the details, and is very quick to pull it up when needed as
Mhm.
evidence, as actual evidence for things. He might also say I'm loving and cute. But also, he'll be like, she has receipts in her head.
You should. Right? We will get more information in the here and now about who you really are based on these observations, based on your actions. We could even go through a list of what have you accomplished, your roles, your goals, your achievements, everything. That tells us more about your real self than any story your OCD has created about who you could possibly be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to get you to learn and trust in again.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm crossing my fingers whether or not we got this presentation, but Amanda and I pitched to IOCGF for this summer's conference to talk about real self more because it is so important. And so fingers crossed that we could get that because I think that is a really helpful concept. And not only that, you described it as beautiful. One of the ways I tend to talk about it on here with clients is that it's really almost like a love letter to yourself, right? It's saying, like, hey, you, this is you. This is pretty special. And sometimes people might go, well, I'm stuck in my home. I'm so severe. There's nothing I've done positively. Because we can usually find even what feels like the most mundane of actions and behaviors and existing are actually saying about you. It goes back to that statement of like actions speak louder than words, right? Because OCD is all talk on that. But actions speak louder than words. And so, looking at even something like, what if I couldn't leave my room because I was worried and felt like the rest of my space was contaminated? Okay, well, what did you do while you were doing that? Well, I shared about how I was upset. Maybe I shared about it on social media, and other people were like, I get it too. Okay, what does that mean about you?
Mhm.
Right?
Beauty of it. It's like these small actions still infer something about who we are. We're not saying you're out there volunteering and saving the world, even though that's all great too.
Yeah, we love that. Do more of that, world. But yes.
For you, not snoozing in, that told me who you really are. You getting your kids to school, that told me who you really are.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a great point, and it's one of those really special pieces because I think for the person with lived experience, and I can speak for myself too as a person of lived experience, realizing like, wow, I'm working so hard and I'm missing the beauty, and your intentions do count and they do matter, right? And so we get to go, wow, like even people stuck in compulsive loops go, well, I don't want anything bad to happen to the people I love. Okay. Even if that threat's not real and that's the illusion, the fact that you were like, the possibility that it could be, I'm going to sacrifice my life to try and help and save these other people from whatever I'm afraid could happen, shows who you are. You're the kind of person that would sacrifice everything, even yourself, for another person. And now we get to go, and you're worth that too. And you get to meet you too, because they're pretty cool. I get to hang out with them on the regular, and I can't wait for you to be able to embrace that as well. It's pretty special. And so I think it's a really, really cool piece of the treatment. And people pivot at different points. But for me, it was a pivot point, and I see that for a lot of clients too, where they start to really engage in building trust. Repairing trust is hard. If you've worked with couples, if you've gone through heartbreaks and broken trust, we know how hard recreating trust is. And so when you're creating it with yourself, and it's so foundational to how you're experiencing the world, it's really hard, but it's also really sacred.
That was beautiful.
Well, thanks. My real self feels flattered. Thank you. Okay, so I want to make sure people know where they can find out more about you and author extraordinaire. You have a book coming out. And so we'd love to hear about all the things. Give us the lowdown. Let's do some family bragging because this is some really cool stuff on the horizon.
Thank you. So I have a book from New Harbinger Publications coming out in June of 2024. It's the Compulsive Reassurance Seeking Workbook. So it's a workbook for anybody that struggles with reassurance seeking compulsions. And what's great is it includes ERP techniques, I-CBT techniques, and ACT techniques. And it's the first New Harbinger book that includes I-CBT in it. And I have my next I-CBT training for clinicians in May.
Mm.
You can either check me out on my website or Instagram's where I spend most of my time.
Yes. So I'm going to have links to Amanda's practice and also to her Instagram. What I really love about Instagram too, this is really helpful, that you do different infographics. And so I love the different ways of learning. I also know for not just our neurodivergent community, but just the community at broad, sometimes seeing those concepts mapped out are really, really helpful. And so you can keep up with Amanda there. But I'm really excited about this reassurance seeking book. You said June?
June 2024.
Yay, that's so exciting. So we'll be on the lookout for that. And we're going to talk more with Amanda next week. So we're going to be doing more role plays, which today was like role play vibes. Amanda, you're going to nail that.
No, how'd you do that?
It was. You were just like, but what does that say? Yes. And I was like, hey, I feel cared for. I am being held by Amanda. So we will see Amanda next week. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I will talk to you soon.
Intrusive Thoughts. All right, all right, all right. That was so fun. And Amanda has such a warm and easy to follow style. I can only imagine how grateful her clients and the clinicians who are in her treatment or trainings feel when listening to her. So thanks again, Amanda. I feel like we've covered a lot of really important ground today, and I'm really excited about meeting back up next week for some practical application. But like I told her, we kind of surfed in the flow of those role play vibes, even as she walked me through my real self today. So that's pretty cool, because I think examples like that can be so helpful for imprinting our learning. And hey, that is a perfect segue, fam, because the Intrusive Thoughts segment is my application segment of the show featured in each and every full-length episode. And as far as I'm concerned, the more application, the merrier. So for today's application, I want to challenge everyone listening to practice your own real self exercise. Now, you may notice I didn't challenge you to figure out or map out your feared possible self. Because as Amanda taught us, not everyone has a FPS, but we are all real people, fam. And scaling things back to what our actions and intent, or even our thoughts mean about who we really are, I think this can be a really special exercise, OCD or not. So because I'm never going to ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do too, I'll go first. Okay, so I'm a podcaster, which, is probably obvious. Yes, that's me. I'm Nicole Morris, and this is the fam, and this is what we do. But what's not obvious is all the different types of work, planning, marketing, advertising, editing, and actually recording or even scheduling recording goes into making a podcast work. And listen, fam, it's 100% worth it, so I'm not complaining by any means. But I've really struggled in one area, and that is getting podcast reviews. And this matters because good advertising, SEO or not, sometimes if you don't have the reviews on the different podcast players or subscriptions and likes on YouTube, the algorithms won't pick you up. And while my overall goal of this work is you, fam, and honestly, as great as continued growth is, I'm not all about the numbers. I am all about people knowing that they're not alone. So whether you're living in a metropolis or a cornfield, I want OCD warriors and families to have access to resources and hope. So over the time of podcasting, I've tried to ask, not just tried, I've asked for reviews on the show. I've posted on social media, I've gone live, I've done giveaways, I have calls to action at the end of every episode, you name it. And while some of the fam here have been so kind to engage, and that it is no small thing, I really do appreciate every review I have received. The one area where I've struggled the most in getting reviews is Apple Podcasts. In fact, I've gone through a dry spell for about a year in Apple Podcasts where people just stopped leaving any kind of review that I can tell. And what's interesting about that is, according to my analytics, the majority of the fam of listeners across all different podcasting players and YouTube are from Apple Podcasts. So understandably, I could feel down about this, and I wouldn't chide anyone who does. But call it whatever you want. I tend to reason that I'm still new enough on the scene and I'll continue to brainstorm, and it's really going to just be a matter of time before that aspect takes off because listening and views on YouTube and all the things continue to grow. So I was sitting pretty for a good minute here, staying optimistic. I just kept swimming. And fast forward to this past week, I was opening up my podcast app, which I primarily use Apple Podcasts, even for me when I'm listening to other podcasts. And I thought, I'm just going to go into my show and check and see if there are any additional reviews yet. And guess what? Much to my surprise, there was. I mean, it was only one more review, and the last review before that, again, over a year ago. But hey, that's one. See, my bar is low. I'm happy with just a little bit of movement there. I'm like, yay. Because one more review is one step closer to a better algorithm. So I excitedly scroll through because sometimes people can leave commentary or little blurbs. Sometimes they can just vote. And there's no shame. I can guarantee anybody who's creating content, if you leave a review, words or not, they appreciate that. But I scroll through to see, did they leave a little something? And they did. I had one. I had a little blurb. My little blurb, baby. Holla. So I look at it and it states, quote, I wanted to enjoy this podcast, but the host would not stop saying fam and talking to listeners like they're 5 years old. It took until halfway through the episode to say anything substantial, end quote. And 2 stars. Now, just keeping it real, because it's all about real self today, right? Right? I was crushed. And here's why. Because, you know what? Not everyone has to like me. And people are allowed to be annoyed by me or my style. Also, I want and invite folks to share feedback, whether it's full of praise or constructive feedback, because I want this to be accessible to everyone who could find it helpful. And so, though I would not judge or blame anyone who would feel hurt more broadly, the part that I laser focused in on was this talking down to people like they're 5. Now, I have to say, I really like 5-year-olds. My specialty before getting into OCD was the birth to 5 population. My own children have now aged out of the ripe age of 5, but I probably don't even talk to 5-year-olds like they're 5, if I'm being honest, in the sense that I imagined this reviewer meant. I try to meet people where they're at. And this was a blow because I never intended to spend all this time and all this effort to make someone else feel small or talked down to. The last thing I want to be is condescending. And even though I'm a recovering perfectionist, this wasn't even about the 2 stars because frankly, I think that would have upset me a lot more in the past. But again, as a recovering perfectionist, oh well, I mean, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother podcast. But suffice to say, you'll just have to believe me that it wasn't about the 2 stars. Am I throwing a party because I got 2 stars? No, I'm not like, yay. But I'm okay with people saying, hey, this wasn't for me. I'm okay with people saying, hey, I was disappointed. We experience this in the therapy world as well. Sometimes clients will peace out early, often without even giving you a heads up. And I really try to live by a mantra that honors that, well, A, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and they may be working out some things, whether I'm aware of them or not aware of it yet. They feel like this isn't a good fit. It's hard to say goodbye, peace out. But also, B, it's not my job to please everyone. I'm a therapist. I'm a mom, wife, podcaster, daughter, friend, sister, and many things. And I, as the rest of us, will all have our moments where we let others down. It doesn't feel great. But I also know that I can't control my own braining, and I can't control what other people think of me. So while I can strive to be a person of integrity, I'm never going to make everyone happy. And even if I could, it's not my job. But for me, as a person that does have, bonus, a feared possible self, as I shared with y'all before, I can and I do worry. What if I neglected a detail here? What if I missed something? What if I was irresponsible and inconsiderate without even realizing it because I call you fam? I want to engage you. I want you to know that you're a part of this. What if my tone or my style is condescending to others? So with this exposition then, I'm going to practice the real self skill I'm encouraging you to practice this week. What does this review and those words, particularly the ones that my brain, my OCD would want to go, oh, see? Like it's in an old crime series or something, and I have to defend my case. What does this review, the particular part of talking to listeners like they're 5 years old, what does this mean about me? Well, first of all, those weren't my words. They were theirs. And is it possible that I'm those things? Sure. But I need to bring it back to myself. My real self looks at me, my thoughts, my actions, my intentions, because those things do matter. So walk through this with me, fam. What kind of person says, fam, okay, more than a few times every episode, with the intention to engage listeners because we're better together? Well, someone who has empathy, someone who wants people to know that these conversations aren't just for me and guests, but includes all of you. Yes, you. Okay. So, I mean, I could probably add then someone who's inclusive and caring to that list. All right. And what kind of person encounters a critique and tries to utilize it constructively in case there's something that can be learned? All right. Well, I suppose a person that is more interested in learning than being right. Ooh, better put a disclaimer in there for my handsome hubs, though, because I fully admit there are times where, come hell or high water, I want to be right. But this wasn't one of those times. Okay, so what kind of person then wants to learn, even if it means that they're wrong? Or more generally, even that there's room to improve? Well, still a caring person, and I like to think a person with integrity that is open, willing to learn. Oh, what kind of person is willing to learn? I mean, a student? Maybe an entrepreneur? I mean, it could be, but I don't know that that one feels right, but a student for sure. All right. And what kind of person is willing to work hard on this content, not for just this episode or last week's or next, but what kind of person has worked hard and consistently for over 2 years, even before I ever pressed record, investing in this work, investing in this community, and yet still investing in each and every one of these episodes? An advocate? Yeah, a person who's dedicated, consistent. Okay, fam, so if I stop there and zoom back out, I can see that actually my real self, just from this brief exercise, was described as empathetic, inclusive, caring, with integrity and openness, also ever a student of life, looking ahead, and a dedicated advocate with consistent fervor. This is my real self. This is who I am. So while that poster may very well have felt annoyed, disappointed, talked down to, those things aren't who I am or who I strive to be. And important, and call it my hyper responsibility kicking in. Hey there. Hey girl. More than one thing can be true too, fam, right? So I can be this real self person, and the poster can leave feeling annoyed, disappointed, and talked down to. They have their feelings and they're entitled to it. So while I can listen with an open posture and apologize, it was not my intention to have a condescending tone, I can also take it as feedback to keep in mind. And while that may and can be helpful, it's also true that this experience and that description doesn't define my real self. So that's the challenge, fam. And I have to say, I think it's a really helpful tool to reflect on what we do, what we say, what we're thinking about, what it really does reflect about our real self. And if you get stuck or would like some prompts on helping with this real self exercise, hop on over to this episode's blog for some prompts at OCDFamilyPodcast.com. And then come back next week, because it's going to involve real selves, role plays, and raps. Oh, hey. Curious? I mean, you'll have to be there to know, fam. And I hope you are, because our family is better with you in it. Thank you for joining me and our OCD family community. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please like and subscribe to the OCD Family Podcast wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Did you find this content helpful? Please consider leaving a review. The more people that know they're not alone, the better. For more information regarding today's podcast, please visit OCDFamilyPodcast.com and remember to join the email list while you're there. It will provide you with the most up-to-date information, resources, and the down low on the family chatter. Oh yeah, nothing says family like Amanda and me, but not FSP. That's right, I went there. And you can too at OCDFamilyPodcast.com.